Granted, it's in a different orientation in different lighting conditions, but and also his hair is dry. But the point being is that forelock area has a significant amount of regrowth. Not only that, but the hair is much darker, right? There are some people that have noticed. The point being is that if you're able to stay above this hair growth threshold of 1.62 nanogram per milliliter, you're essentially delivering enough minoxidil exposure to the hair follicles that you're going to get a sort of hair growth benefit. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another video. You saw the title, so let's just jump right into it. I'm on Tressless, and I'm looking at this post that was brought to my attention on my Discord server. This post was made 2 months ago, so the fact that it isn't on the front page is pretty ridiculous to me. But we have a clinical trial participant of Veradermics VDPHL01, the extended release oral minoxidil, posting about their experience and their results. And when looking at the description, they talk about how they've been taking 8.5 milligram of this extended release of oral minoxidil. That's 8.5 milligram twice daily. So that's 17 milligrams of daily exposure. And that sounds crazy, I know, right? But this isn't your typical oral minoxidil. In fact, don't do this with standard oral minoxidil, the instant release oral minoxidil, because you might just end up getting some pretty nasty side effects. So what are we talking about, right? If you look at the R&D from Veradermics, they, through their clinical trial signals, right, this has been, a lot of R&D went into this. From their clinical trial signals, and also just by them doing some deep dives in the literature, they were able to come up with the FDA-established cardiac threshold, the range in which it is acknowledged that oral minoxidil starts to elicit cardiac effects, which could be something like, racing heart, which would be tachycardia. Things like fluid retention are certainly implicated in that particular threshold range. And other sort of issues, shortness of breath, etc., etc. At the same time, they were also able to establish the hair growth threshold being 1.62 nanogram per milliliter. By the way, the cardiac activity threshold would be 20 nanogram per milliliter, right? And once again, that's the range where you're actually going to see things like a drop in blood pressure. Anyway, the point being is that if you're able to stay above this hair growth threshold of 1.62 nanogram per milliliter, you're essentially delivering enough minoxidil exposure to the hair follicles that you're going to get a sort of hair growth benefit, so long as you have the sulfotransferase enzymatic activity that's needed to do so, right? Because at the end of the day, minoxidil is a prodrug. You need minoxidil sulfate, the active form, to actually help grow with the hair. And they also made this, pretty graphic over here to accompany their presentation. So the idea is, if you can extend the serum or the blood presence of minoxidil, you can probably give your body some time to metabolize it better, even in individuals that have a low sulfotransferase enzyme. And again, that enzyme, the sulfotransferase enzyme, is the enzyme that converts minoxidil, right over here, into minoxidil sulfate, right? The SALT 1A1 enzyme, sulfotransferase enzyme. If you don't have enough of this, you're not going to be a good responder. However, if you're able to give your body more time to metabolize minoxidil, because by the way, minoxidil has a pretty short half-life. The standard oral minoxidil in its typical instant release, a very, very short half-life. I think it's like 3 to 4 hours. So essentially, your body is kind of clamoring during that time to try to metabolize the minoxidil sulfate and deliver it to where it needs to be. Whereas VDPHL01, through their proprietary extended release technology, they're able to increase this time to over 12 hours, right? And it's not that the drug itself is dumping all of this minoxidil into your blood, right? That would certainly cause a lot of side effects if you just had a single shot of 8.5 milligram oral minoxidil releasing into your bloodstream within a short amount of time, or if you just had 17 milligrams of oral minoxidil just being metabolized and, instantly released into your bloodstream, you're going to have some side effects because there is this sort of peaking effect of oral minoxidil that occurs as soon as you take it, right? As soon as you take it, it's going to peak above the cardiac activity threshold at a standard 2.5 milligram, even 5 milligram, instant release. And some people are even crazier than that. You have guys in the community taking like 10 milligram and 20 milligram, which certainly causes side effects in a lot of people. So if you're not peaking above that threshold, you're reducing the chances in which people are going to get side effects. And that's what their goal is. That's what the proprietary technology that their research and development team came to, right? And in doing so, they've noticed some things in their clinical trials where you're seeing things like sooner hair growth, right? You're seeing people seeing some improvements in their scalp in the clinical trial in a short amount of time. I think it's like 3 to 4 months, which is pretty insane, right? Let me see if I can zoom out. But over here, they say VDPHL01 shortens the telogen phase, right? And if you're able to shorten any of these phases, particularly the telogen phase, because after the telogen phase, you're going into the anagen phase. If you're able to shorten this telogen phase, you're getting sooner hair growth. So that is pretty cool, right? We would like to see our hair grow sooner than later, especially those hairs that are a bit stubborn, that are in the dormancy phase. We need a good kicker to kind of wake them up and get them growing again. But it's not just that we're getting a good kicker. We're getting some pretty good cosmetic benefits too. Some pretty good hair growth benefits as well. Now, if you're looking at the screen, you're seeing baseline results of this clinical trial participant of VDPHL01, and then 6 months out into the future. Now, before we even look at this result or we even talk about it, let's have a look at the hair counts, because there's been some controversy about the hair counts. Some people are saying, Veradermics might have exaggerated the hair count, and it's too good to be true. And maybe, sometimes things like that do happen. But let's kind of give some context over here. So VDPHL01, 8.5 milligram twice daily, so that's around 17 milligrams per day. And then you have VDPHL01, 8.5 milligram once daily. And you're seeing a stronger, target area hair count than you're seeing something like 5% Rogaine foam, instant release oral minoxidil at 5 milligram. In this one study from the Journal of American, I think this is American Dermatology. Actually, this is the Journal of American Dermatology over here. But in any case, these two journals over here, JAMA and JAD, they're showing that, maybe the instant release standard oral minoxidil does have some problems, right? And I'm not going to go searching for it right now, but some of you guys already know this. There is that Brazilian study that shows 5% topical minoxidil not doing any better than 5 milligram standard oral minoxidil, the standard instant release oral minoxidil, because there is some sort of issue that needs to be surmounted, and that is the enzymatic activity, not just from sulfotransferase, right? Although, Veradermics does point that out. Sulfotransferase is the enzyme that we're concerned about when it comes to minoxidil to convert to minoxidil sulfate. But, I have my own sort of thoughts over here that I wrote about. When did I write this? I want to say this was around maybe a year ago now. Or a year or two ago, because that was the edit. But you have transporter proteins that are designed to take the minoxidil, put it into the outer root sheath of the hair follicle, where the keratinocytes there can convert it into minoxidil sulfate, so long as they have enough minoxidil sulfate, then spit it back out. Now that minoxidil sulfate has to be, put into the dermal papilla cells to stimulate the dermal papilla cells so they give the right signaling to tell the the hair follicle stem cells to start becoming active again. And arguably, maybe there is some sort of stimulation that occurs to the hair follicle stem cells themselves from oral minoxidil. But all of this relies on transporter proteins that, some of us, we probably don't have good transporter proteins, right? And it might be arguable that due to chronic exposure to DHT and long-term hair loss, it's going to be very hard for any of these transporter proteins to exist in abundance enough in a way to help convert the minoxidil into minoxidil sulfate and put the minoxidil sulfate where it needs to be to adequately help grow hair. But that's also why you want to give your body more time. You want to give your enzymes and these transporter proteins more time to properly metabolize minoxidil. And this is what VDPHL01's proprietary extended release technology is doing. And that's why it's certainly an interesting drug. And, it's something that I want to try. And I know you listening right now, you'd like to try as well. But going back to this result over here, as well as the hair counts, there are people that are saying, well, when it comes to the non-vellus target area hair count increase, perhaps, Veradermics, along with other companies, they're playing with what is considered a non-vellus hair, right? Maybe they're including hairs that are slightly above the range that is considered to be vellus hair, which could be true, right? But I want to show you this picture. This is a clinical trial photo, right? And you're seeing a story. At a similar hair length, what do you notice? Certainly 6 months later, you see that in the midsection, damn near the crown area, the hairs are becoming stronger, they're becoming thicker, they're becoming wider, and arguably, there's more hair, right? This is something that is cosmetically recognizable. Not only that, but when you shift your attention to the temporal region, you're starting to see some hair, some wispy hairs here and there. Some surely are vellus, but also some are, they're intermediate, maybe on the the shy side of being intermediate. They're definitely not vellus hairs anymore, but they're transitioning. You can see a sort of transition occurring, especially in this sort of forelock region over here. If you're not looking at the screen, please have a look. Now, we have to remember something important. You're looking at a guy that's probably facing androgenetic alopecia for decades without taking any treatment. That's probably, what this guy is, right? Just my, my estimation. Yet he's getting earlier results rather, but also he's getting this sort of transition of these vellus hairs into non-vellus hairs. And guys, once you get into that sort of non-vellus hair territory, who knows what's going to happen, right? And also take into account these guys are not on finasteride or dutasteride. So certainly that makes it very appealing to stack dutasteride, with VDPHL01. The point being is you are looking at a superior hair growth stimulant. You're looking at a formulation by Veradermics and their R&D that just looks better. That is, arguably has some really, really good clinical signals. Enough for me to say that this is how oral minoxidil should have been. So I don't think this is like a play on numbers where they're including a lot of non-vellus hairs that are technically vellus hairs and they're over-exaggerating the, the hair growth benefits. Yeah, like when you put into context, if this, if these vellus hairs don't mature past 6 months, or these intermediate hairs don't really grow past 6 months, then maybe it could be, questionable. But you're seeing some pretty aggressive and early results in these clinical trial participants. And once again, they're only on minoxidil. It stands to reason that if you stack it with dutasteride, or finasteride, these guys are going to get even better results than somebody just using a typical standard release instant release oral minoxidil. And now we can look at the clinical trial participant. This is his before picture, his baseline picture. It looks like he's coming out of the pool. We can make a reasonable statement that his hair does appear to be wet. Notice how aggressive his hair loss is, right? This guy is probably like a Norwood 5, damn near, probably could be a 6, on a bad day. But we can't see his midsection from here. This is a bit of a bad photo, but still you kind of see the shape of his hairline. Now, the image results he posted, granted it's in a different orientation in different lighting conditions, and also his hair is dry. But the point being is that forelock area has a significant amount of regrowth. Not only that, but the hair is much darker, right? There are some people that I've noticed with minoxidil use, their hair becomes darker over time. And just imagine what minoxidil is doing. You're getting more disulfide bond because of the stimulation of minoxidil sulfate to the hair follicle. It's causing the keratinocytes along with the melanocytes to kind of, work harder, to work in a more efficient manner, moving resources to where they need to go. That ultimately builds the hair shaft and, creates a stronger strand of keratin, a thicker strand of keratin, which would be your hair shaft, your hair strands. And that's why the hair typically becomes darker. So I would say that he moved up maybe a Norwood and a half, which is pretty significant considering this guy is, old and has been dealing with androgenetic alopecia for a long time, and also is not on any 5-alpha reductase inhibitor like finasteride or dutasteride. So this is a pretty significant result. If we look at the crown over here, or rather the midsection, still in his after result, you're seeing a pretty aggressive temporal recession, right? This thing isn't magic. It's not going to, save you if you've waited too long, but who knows what it can do beyond 6 months, right? It is improving the hairs that exist and also giving him some new hairs, right? Who knows how his hair would be? It could make the results even more exaggerated if he were to use a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. And what kind of makes me, excited is this picture of his crown area, because what you can see in this crown area is that he's starting to experience some growth in that area as well. So the message that I'm trying to, give to you guys here is that if you stack this with dutasteride or finasteride, it's definitely going to be better than your typical standard instant release oral minoxidil that has a short half-life, that if you even try to take at a high dose, you're probably going to end up hurting yourself. So once again, this is some brilliant R&D from the Veradermics team. And, hey, Veradermics team, I would love to try VDPHL01. I know it's in clinical trials. I'll sign a waiver, whatever happens to me, although it does have some really good safety data. But I would love to try this, like right now. I certainly would. But with that being the case, you guys have to be careful because there are some fakes out there. There are some, certain people that are claiming to do something similar. However, they don't have the clinical backing. And realistically, in some instances, they're actually attempting to mimic the proprietary extended release technology developed by Veradermics. So avoid those companies. VDPHL01 is not out yet. So anybody claiming that, we're pretty much the same as VDPHL01, it should be met with some skepticism, some heavy dosed skepticism, some extended release skepticism. I guess that was a bit corny, but that's pretty much it for this video. And we can have a quick look at TrichoLens, the AI trichologist tool that my team and I came up with. And when we plug those results here, this will be deleted soon, but when we plug those results here, we can kind of get an understanding of the clinical trial participants in Norwood, before and afters. Photo 2 over here is the before, and it's marking it at a Norwood 6 to 7. This is pretty severe. And I guess it makes sense, right? Like, if it can't see the midsection, it's probably going to make the most aggressive assumption based on how severe the frontal recession is. But you're seeing better signals in the after picture. because it marks it at a Norwood 4 or 5, which is certainly better than, being around a 6, right? So this is like a Norwood 4 or 5. So that's pretty much it. I'll put the link in the description if you want to try out tricolins as well. But also I'll put a link in the description to the Veradermics presentation on the Veradermics website, along with this Reddit post over here. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. And I hope, come on, I'll sign the waiver. I'd love to try VDPHL01. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, guys, and see ya.